Freshwater mussels, or clams as most of us call them, can be found in pretty much every stream in the UP and beyond. And they're a lot more interesting than you may think. Then we're going fishing with Gatlin and Peyton.
I do like sports, but I gotta say I like fishing more.
Lots of our kids in the school just play video games while we're here fishing.
Stick around, it's time for 906 Outdoors. 9 million acres of forest, 1,700 miles of continuous shoreline, 4,300 lakes, 12,000 miles of streams, more than 300 waterfalls, 15 counties, 2 time zones, and 1 area code. Welcome to the Upper Peninsula. Welcome to 906 Outdoors.
Today we're here in Dickinson County, and we're going to be surveying for freshwater mussels. So right here we have a creek heel splitter. You have the anterior side here, posterior over here, and then of course the dorsal and the ventral part of the shell. So they go in anterior side down. So if you're ever in a stream or a creek or a lake, make sure you put them down on the anterior side because they filter up on the posterior side. They are filter feeders. They filter up to 8 gallons of water per day. They filter out detritus, bacteria, algae. They're pretty amazing creatures. They have a lot of unique names. Purple wartyback, there's fat mucket, spike. There's a lot of colorful names that we call freshwater mussels. And they may all look the same, but they're different species. Here in North America, we have nearly 300 species of freshwater mussels, by far the most diverse in the entire world. Most of the diversity is located in the southeastern portion of the United States. Alabama has 175 species of freshwater mussels. Here in Michigan, we have 45 species of mussels. And more locally, in the UP, we have 13 species of freshwater mussels. What makes them really unique, though, is their life cycle, how they reproduce. During reproduction, you have a male and female, and you have external fertilization. The female takes in the male's sperm, and that's where fertilization occurs. The female will hold the mussel larvae, or what we call glochidia, in her shell. For the mussel to complete its life cycle, it needs to find a fish host. The female mussel is burrowed into the sediment, and she needs to figure out how to get that fish to her in order to release her glochidia, or her baby mussels, onto the fish. She uses fish lures, mimicry. They can mimic little minnows, little crustaceans, macroinvertebrates. There's a variety of methods how these little creatures can entice a fish to come over and check them out. So once the fish does come over, the female mussel will release her glochidia near the fish, and the fish will, just through normal respiration, the glochidia will attach to the gills. This typically does not harm the fish, but they will insist on that fish. Usually it's over a couple weeks. Once they're transformed into juvenile mussels, they'll release themselves from the fish and go back down into the sediment and start the whole process over. They'll grow into adults and reproduce from there. And for most freshwater mussel species, reproduction begins when water temperatures increase. So generally in spring and summer, that's when most of the reproduction will occur. There's a few species that go into October, but the majority of them are definitely in the summertime. It's quite amazing. So that's what attracted me to learning more about freshwater mussels in the first place, is their life cycle.
Today's show is brought to you in part by Rapid River Knife Works.
Rapid River Knife Works is the largest custom knife factory showroom in Michigan. Hunting knives, pocket knives, and kitchen knives. Watch your custom knife being made and engraved. Free laser engraving with your personal message or company logo. Lifetime warranty on every knife and free sharpening. Bring the family and visit Rapid River Knife Works today.
Mussels have certain ecological requirements in order to survive very well. Since they are filter feeders, they need plenty of free-flowing water in order to be able to get food from the water column. They also need plenty of oxygen, like any other organism. They also need to live in an environment where there's low sedimentation. If there's too much sand coming into the system, they could easily get buried or suffocate. Their reproduction is largely jump-started by water temperature, so they need warmer water temperatures for that reproduction to start, as well as growth, but they can't have it too high, otherwise they're going to not survive well. So a lot of times you'll find mussels in what are called mussel beds. Since freshwater mussels don't move very far, they can't go swimming looking for a mate. It's in their advantage to group together and live together in a mussel bed. So often you'll find, once you find one mussel, you find a lot more mussels once you start looking. Yep, see, so just another example of an ecosystem service that freshwater mussels provide. You see the freshwater coral here growing on the mussel. And it's not inhibiting the mussel at all, it's just utilizing the shell that's provided in the stream. And once it gets underwater, it turns bright green. If they do need to move, say, the water levels have decreased and they're along the shoreline and they need to look for more suitable habitat, they can move a short distance with their foot. It's not very quickly, obviously, but they're able to do it. Also, if, like, say, a chemical pollution event happened, freshwater mussels often are canaries in the coal mine. They can be very sensitive to certain pollutants. In particular, if there's high ammonia levels, you may see a lot of the freshwater mussels, their shells closed. They're not able to filter in those type of events. If it's a more chronic pollution event, you'll start seeing decreases in population over time. Unfortunately, sometimes that's what you'll see is a chronic event where mussels are decreasing. You won't necessarily see a huge high die-off, but when you do it, it can be pretty dramatic. For the internal anatomy, they have gills, and then they also have a foot that helps with feeding when they're younger juveniles, and also stability in the sediment. And they have exhalant and inhalant apertures. Sometimes the only thing you'll see when you're looking for freshwater mussels, they're burrowed so deep down into the sediment that you won't even see most of the mussel. And then they have muscles to hold the two shells together, and then mantle margins here. It looks pretty simple, but there's definitely necessary parts in order to make them complete their life cycles. So freshwater mussels are also known as ecosystem engineers, and they're pretty integral component to a stream. They filter out bacteria, a lot of potential chemicals in the system. They increase water clarity. They provide substrate for fish spawning populations. They also provide food for creatures and mammals that live along the river as well. Here is a dragonfly larvae, and he was living in the shell of this pocketbook. So even after they've died, they provide many uses for the animals that are currently in there. And you see his foot coming in. That's where he or she was stabilized. Some species of freshwater mussels are sexually dimorphic, meaning you can tell the difference between a female and a male. Not all of them are, but some, like a fat mucket, a female is going to be larger on the posterior side so she can have room to grow her glochidia and eventually release it in the water columns. Freshwater mussels are not the same as our aquatic invasive species mussels that we typically hear. They are not zebra mussels or quagga mussels, and they're not related as well. In fact, it's really, really important that we don't have zebra mussels or quagga mussels come into a system where freshwater mussels are, because the shells of the freshwater mussels provide perfect substrate for those invasive species to attach to. I've seen lakes where zebra mussels come in. Unfortunately, the freshwater mussel population, they can't compete. The zebra mussels just cover the shells completely. They're not able to feed, they just die out into a lake. So it's really important that we prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, in particular those zebra and quagga mussels. So that is a spike mussel. He blended in very well with the rocks. Historically, it was thought that mussels were very important to Native American tribes. Historically, they used them for tools, jewelry, some religious ceremonies. And then you fast forward up to probably maybe the mid-1800s, there was an actual button industry. Before the advent of plastic buttons, we used freshwater mussel shells for our buttons on our shirts. Starting in the mid-1850s, there was about 40 button factories along the Mississippi River. We had button factories as well in Michigan. At its heyday, it employed nearly 20,000 people in America. So between 1857 and 1963, the button industry was estimated at a value of $10 billion in today's value. Unfortunately, it was left unregulated and a lot of the mussel beds were depleted very quickly. So the mussel industry for button use did not last very long. This is another example of a pocketbook. You can see the thickness of this shell and why, before plastic, why freshwater mussels were so useful in our button industry. Shells range in very small to maybe like a quarter size, probably like a slipper shell mussel. This is a lot larger mussel. It's a pocketbook, and they can live very old, well over 50 years old. You can age mussels, kind of like rings on a tree. Yeah, each growth ring here, you'll see, is a year of the mussel's life. Count the rings on it, and that can be a good estimate of how old that mussel is. There's other species that are of freshwater mussel that are even bigger than the pocketbook. There's a washboard that's probably twice as big as this. So they can get very large, or like I was saying, they can get really tiny, like the slipper shell, like about the size of a nickel or a quarter. It is not legal for citizens to harvest freshwater mussels, so they can't take them. They can't even take the shells. But I highly encourage folks who are curious to learn more about freshwater mussels to go pick them up, look at them, check them out, and then gently put them back where you found them.
"906 Outdoors" is brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings. Cooking Wild Seasoning summer sausage, regular, jalapeno, and garlic. Get yours today at cookingwildseasonings.com. It's time to make you hungry. Brought to you by Cooking Wild Seasonings.
Now we've got some nice king salmon here that we're going to do two of my favorite ways. I have a friend that makes a sweet and spicy red pepper jelly. I put this on a lot of stuff, but it's really, really good on salmon. It's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit spicy, works great on the grill or under the broiler. So we're going to put a nice layer of this on here. And then we're going to do a little bit of a dry Thai seasoning. There's just a Thai seasoning with some red pepper, some hot spices in here. We're just going to put a little bit of that on and let it soak in. And then we're going to use some Kiwana Kitchen's hot pepper jelly. It's not quite as spicy as the red pepper. It's got a completely different flavor profile. And then we're going to use regular Old Bay. And we'll put a nice layer of that on. So we've got the grill heating. Again, with fish, we don't have to go very long as far as cooking time. So probably about 10 to 12 minutes, and we should have this just perfect. Now, fish you can't put directly on the grill because a lot of times it'll flake and then it'll start to fall apart. So I always like to use either a grill pan or you could put some foil down. And we're just going to do it on one side. We're not going to flip this over at all. Okay, so here's the other pepper with the Old Bay. And this will be just as good too.
"906 Outdoors" is brought to you by Race Driven.
Get in touch with your adventurous side and find your drive with Race Driven. As an online retailer, dealership, and manufacturer, we can provide power sport enthusiasts with virtually any part or accessories for ATV, UTV, and motorcycles. Customer driven, quality driven, race driven.
Fishing is a pole, a reel, line, and some bait. But most of all, it's something inside of us that makes us just want to do it over and over. I had the extreme pleasure of spending some time on a river with a couple of great fishermen who act as a true reminder of why we fish.
Oh, it was in a good spot. We don't live too far away from here, so usually we ride our bikes, and then usually we stay a couple hours, 3 or 4 hours. And usually we catch quite a bit of brookies. Usually we just use worms, but sometimes we use lures, spinners like he's using. Probably about 3 weeks ago I caught a 15-incher, and he caught one on the same day. The average around like here is probably 11 inches. Started fishing with my dad when I was like real little. Now I fish with my grandpa a lot, and obviously Peyton. Probably come here a couple times a week. We catch a lot of nice fish. And brookies, in my opinion, are probably the prettiest fish, with especially natives with their orange stomach and all that. And they're just kind of a win-win when they fight so hard and are so pretty, and when you take them home, they're pretty good eating. We bought a little camping stove so we can cook up our brookies right on the river sometimes without making a fire, because that could end not so well, and a lot of people these days don't like that. So, and usually we just fry them in tin foil and some butter and a little bit of lemon pepper and garlic. There's another spot up there that we catch fish a lot too. We call it the pond because it sort of looks like a pond compared to the rest of the river. Along with some days, like when they're biting and when they're not, sometimes when they are biting, they're either smacking it or they're doing little wimpy bites like chubs. I was fishing with my grandpa, and I caught a 14-incher there, and that was the biggest brookie I ever caught in my life. And I was so excited. I kept saying, I don't think I'll ever catch a brookie bigger than that, and then I come back here and I catch that 15-incher. The first person I called was him. I had to get it mounted. So my great grandpa, he tied a lot of flies. He was a big fly fisherman. He made his own fly rods and stuff. And after he passed away, his friend that tied flies got a lot of his fly tying stuff. But then he ended up giving all that stuff to me. And that kind of started my fly tying. I sold some and made like 20 bucks selling them, but I do a lot more of this type of fishing than fly fishing. I can't really find a good spot where the trees and all that will cooperate with the fly line.
We were over at that other spot on the other side of the river, and then there was a wolf, and then it kept coming towards us. It kept getting closer and closer, and then a dog came from nowhere and spooked it away. So we were pretty lucky.
I usually just like to watch my line, and once my line starts taking off underwater, I'll just kind of touch my line to see if I can feel anything. If I feel a couple solid hits, I'll usually open my bail and let it take out line for like 5 or 10 seconds, and then I'll close my bail and wait till it keeps running, and then the line gets tight, and then I usually set the hook right about there. Usually works pretty good. Miss a couple of fish, but not many.
We're gonna go take a walk back in the woods and go to a little creek and hope to catch some.
I think we're probably the only people that know about it. Well, a lot of the garbage there says otherwise.
And we don't like people who litter.
906 Outdoors is brought to you in part by NutriFeed, nutritional feed solutions for deer and horses.
We're coming up on a spot here that we've also caught a couple brookies, and we'll see if maybe they want to cooperate here. It almost looks man-made. Is it a little brookie or a chub?
It is a brookie.
Huh? Oh yeah, a little brookie.
Yeah.
Usually we go here. There's another spot a little bit closer to where we live that we sometimes go, but we usually don't get as many there. We've been fishing together for probably around probably our third summer fishing together. We used to catch northern and walleye and bass at Teal Lake, but that kind of got boring to us, I guess, and we tried fishing a river, which was actually here, and we caught a couple brookies, and we kind of liked how they were so small but fought so hard, and so it's what we do most of the time now. Well, actually trout in general. They just fight so hard.
It's a chub.
Should take its tail. A lot of other spots, like cloudy days are best.
A little drizzle.
Yeah, but here a nice calm sunny day, we usually kill them.
Not kill them.
I like fishing with someone. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. I wouldn't say it's scary, but
It's boring.
yeah.
If you're by yourself, you don't have anyone to talk to. So one time me and Gatlin were fishing in our waders, and I just cast it about 2 feet in front of me, and I looked behind me and my dad pulled up, and I got this big fish that just came out of nowhere, about 20 inches or bigger, and we just kept walking towards shore, and we had it on just splashing everywhere. We could see it really good, but we didn't bring a net, so he was just trying to do me a favor, so he picked up the line, and the line snapped, and now the fish lives.
And you have since switched to 6-pound test instead of 4.
I used to have 4-pound line, and now I have 6-pound line. What got me started fishing is when I was little, everyone at my camp used to go fishing, and I never got to go, so I wanted to go. So then one time I asked my dad if I could go, and he said yeah. And then we ended up catching a bunch of them. And that's how I got started.
And I got started, well, my grandma and grandpa have a house on a river that if you go at certain spots you can catch brookies, but right where they live you never would really catch brookies, but you'd catch a lot of big chubs. And I would just sit all in a lawn chair and just fish with my dad and my grandpa, and that's what kind of got me started. And we would spend a lot of time down at the river catching chubs. And I like fishing because it's I like to do what, it might sound cheesy or something, but I like to do what a lot of other people don't, and a lot of kids at my school and stuff aren't really into fishing, and they're all on their phones and doing other stuff and playing sports. I do like sports, but I gotta say I like fishing more.
Lots of our kids in the school just play video games while we're here fishing. One time I said more kids should do this or something, and then I kind of realized they should and they shouldn't, because if they did, we wouldn't have all these fish to catch, but then if they did, then there'd probably be a whole nother generation of outdoorsmen and women and all that. So yeah, that's what got me started and all that. It's lots about the scenery. It's always a plus, but just being out here is kind of nice. I used to get really bored just sitting here and stuff, but we did a lot of walking today, so maybe that helps. But like I said, I would have liked to catch fish. It probably would have spiced it up a little bit, but I guess it's okay that we didn't. Maybe next time.
This show is dedicated to my dad, AJ Cartman. Love you. Ooh. Ooh, did you see that?
No.
It was a brookie.
Oh, the bite's on.
Why, did you have a bite?
Yeah, Didn't
We
seem-
might have to stay a little bit longer.
it didn't seem big. It was just right in front of us, too.
Join 906 Outdoors on Facebook to see where we've been and where we're going, and get a glimpse of what's happening around the UP. And stop in at 906outdoors.com, where you can watch any of our past shows and see what's coming up next. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you next week right here on 906 Outdoors.